Good evening. My name is Jillian Ream Gainsley, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area. I welcome you to tonight's forum featuring candidates for Washtenaw County Prosecutor. The candidates will be on the ballot in the general election on Tuesday, November 8th. We are broadcasting this evening from the studios of CTN in Ann Arbor. The League of Women Voters is pleased to be sponsoring these forums. The League is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that does not support candidates or parties, but we do take a stand on issues that we have studied. One of the League's important goals is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls, and thus we bring you tonight's program. Volunteers from the League of Women Voters are facilitating tonight's forum. Our moderator this evening is Will Hathaway, who will explain the process from here.
Good evening. There are two candidates for Washtenaw County Prosecutor. The two candidates are DeReal Graham and Brian Mackey. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement and a 1-minute closing statement. We ask that you please use your opening and closing statements as opportunities to provide voters your views on the issues. The order of speaking was determined by drawing from a hat before we began. Opening first will be Mr. Mackey, followed by Mr. Graham. As the moderator, I will ask the questions which came from the community and a committee of League members. Each candidate has up to 90 seconds for a response. At appropriate times, the timers will hold up their paddles with amounts of time remaining and then finally a stop sign. Please stop when indicated so that you each have an equal opportunity to participate. Our timers are League members Betty Bishop and Janine DeLay. And now we're ready for opening statements. First, Mr. Mackey.
Thank you very much. My profound thanks to the League of Women Voters. For almost a century, you have provided a very important public service of informing the voters about the issues that they face, especially when they get into the ballot box. My thanks also to CTN for hosting us physically tonight. I have been the prosecuting attorney for more than 20 years, as you may know. Many things informed my experience, made me appropriate for this job. Being a defense attorney, working at Free Legal Aid, working as an assistant prosecutor. More importantly, I have assembled a great office. I have talented, ethical assistants that work well in all the areas of service we provide. Victim services, child support, where millions of dollars have been sought and gained for children over the years who would otherwise not receive support, and also, of course, the criminal division, which is most familiar to most people. I look forward to answering your questions.
Mr. Graham.
Thank you for hosting us tonight. It's great to be here in studio. I'm appreciative of the League of Women Voters for reaching out and inviting me to be available for tonight's forum. As an educator, I feel it's important for us to support each other, not only when it's important for us to reach our goals, our personal goals. I think as an educator, we are responsible for connecting people together. In this election cycle, I want to continue to encourage people to reimagine community, not just for their household or their neighborhood or the centers that they occupy the most, but to consider Washtenaw County as the home base to reimagine, to be reimaginative, for us to make up words, to place value on each other, and to understand that our values and our concerns deserve platforms. This platform tonight hopefully will encourage listeners to not decide primarily on what they're going to do when they walk into the ballot booth and want to elect us, but I want them to understand that it's important for them to be engaged. It's important for our community to be active, not just to secure safety for one another and the infrastructure that currently exists, but to advocate for each other's well-being. So I hope tonight we can do more than think about corrections and law enforcement and criminalizing people, but I hope today we can understand that it's important that we embrace each other.
Thank you. Beginning with Mr. Graham, the first question is, there are 10 or more police jurisdictions in our county. Are there major differences in how the prosecutor's office works with each of them? If so, what are they?
It's important for people to understand that Washtenaw County is not small. We have many people who call this place their home. Many of the people have different interactions with first responders, them being law enforcement agents or responding to emergencies. The people who live outside of Ypsilanti proper and Ann Arbor proper, again, they have different encounters with these first responders. So to focus the attention on the two larger communities is important because people consider these urban environments as a problem where there's a lot of undesirable behavior. And to focus on what happens during this process is important. The function of the county prosecutor is to do more than convict. It is to serve the community, to engage the community, and make sure there is justice wrought during the process. So for the 10 communities, yes, they all deserve high quality public safety, but the 10 communities are not having the same issues when it comes to public safety and social issues. So I think we should focus on what's driving the corrections and law enforcement in our community and then understand how to address those issues.
Mr. Mackey, same question.
We are generally in agreement, Mr. Graham and I. The issues are different for different communities. Obviously, the size of the police forces are different. You might make an argument that we have too many police forces, some very small, and those very small forces need more help from the prosecutor and from their colleagues around the county in law enforcement. Some issues, however, are the same, no matter what the community is. We have in this state, and certainly in Washtenaw County, a lack of services for the mentally ill. I don't think people fully can realize until they do a ride-along or they listen to an hour of police calls on the radio that police are the first system that people contact when they're mentally ill. They're vitally important in that. So one of the things that we do in my office, and some of the big departments helpful in this also, the U of M DPS, the Sheriff's Department, Ann Arbor Police, training officers, free training for people, how to deal with the mentally ill, how to deal with the various difficult problems that come up on a day-to-day basis.
Next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Mackey. When the situation calls for a jury trial, does Washtenaw have a strong and diverse jury pool? And if not, what is being done to create such a pool?
That has been a struggle as long as I've been alive and you've been alive. And what has changed over the years is we once went only by voter rolls to select a jury panel. The problem with that, of course, is a number of people, for a variety of reasons, are not on jury panels. In fact, there was a time when some people avoided registering to vote just to avoid, for whatever reason they thought was the dreaded jury duty. We need a bigger pool. I'm appalled when I hear people who want to get out of jury duty. People who think it's funny. I've had people say, I'm glad I know you because I say that and I get out of jury duty. I wish people wanted to serve on juries. We have expanded the panel by going to things like utility bills. How do people interact with the government or private agencies so that we can find out who they are and draw them into the jury panel? Then there's the issue of once we have them and they're called, to get them to physically come in to serve on juries, because that is a tremendous right. I'll tell you, one of the good changes in law over the years is there was a time when I started in prosecution that the prosecutor could not demand a jury. Now we can. So yes, we want people to serve, as many people as possible in the community.
And Mr. Graham, same question to you.
It's important for our community to be engaged. How do we engage the community? How do we convince the community that it's important for them to detach from their daily walk to be in service? Most of our residents and most people who enter our community understand that it's a high honor to be called. It's a high honor to serve. We need to make the process a little bit more welcoming. I don't know too many people who have been invited to this important role who had enough time to prepare as well. A lot of people need to have their house in order for them to break away, or their work in order to break away to respond to this. So we have to be more considerate of the lives that we are also interrupting. So that's a part of this Reimagine Community campaign. We want people to consider each other. The work is valuable. What we are expecting is a lot as well. So when we are thinking about our expectations, let's also ensure that we're giving people enough time to fit into this important process and to actually be engaged.
Next question, and we'll start with you, Mr. Graham. Do you think that there is a place for restorative justice in Washtenaw County when responding to crimes? And if yes, how do you think it can be used? What role could the sheriff and prosecuting attorney play in using restorative practices in the community and with the police department?
To restore implies that there is something broken. I'm glad that we're using this word. We have to bring people into this conversation through the exchange of words. Something that is broken means that there are many people who need to pick up these pieces. To restore something is not just leaning on our discretion, it's not just leaning on a constitution, it's not just leaning on punitive practices. We have to point out the system has, as it currently functions, in order for us to figure out how to find an alternative. It is important for us to evaluate more than restore. We are losing too many individuals in Washtenaw County to the correctional facility at Hogback and Washtenaw. When we think about numbers, we should be able to prepare individuals who work in law enforcement and corrections to do their job, but we also should be able to inform the public enough so they know that if their rights are violated, there's a vicious system in place that could devour them. And if we don't use words like devour, I think we will never be able to restore.
Mr. Mackey?
This is a big topic that 90 seconds is inadequate to cover, but it's important. And we are using restorative practices in more ways than you know. One unfortunate thing, my office used to have a diversion program that was tremendously successful, but it cost money. And had I to do it over again, I would have fought harder, because where the dollars went, I think, were not as effective. We need restorative justice in a bigger concept. It's not just about sending people to prison. We have many diversion programs before people ever get to prison. And in Michigan in general, we use prison less than any other state. It's a last resort. We don't lock up small-time drug offenders. The stories about that are untrue. Most of the people in Michigan prisons are dangerous. We need to have more restorative justice in different ways, and we're doing that now. One of the ways is with schools and children. And we have a tremendous problem of absenteeism, and we do restorative practices with families to get the parents educated about the extreme importance of getting their child in school. The absentee rate in this county is appalling, as high as 40% for kindergartners in some of our eastern school districts. That's unacceptable, and restorative practices can help fix that.
The next question, and we'll start with you, Mr. Mackey. 2014 statistics from the Michigan State Police files show that in that year, black youth in Washtenaw County were arrested at 5 times the rate of white youth and put into secure detention 2 times as often as white youth. What can prosecutors and the sheriff do to improve the equity of this situation?
I don't think the sheriff can actually do much other than as a citizen advocate. One of the things we need is more options. If you look at our society, you can go simply by zip code. Look at all the bad things that can happen in society. Infant mortality, crime rate, any number of things. You'll see that minorities are vastly overrepresented. And I don't blame the criminal justice system, I blame this country. For 400 years, we have had a terrible problem. It is our worst problem to overcome. And We have a lot of keys. Education is key. I'm involved in Fight Crime, Invest in Kids. We have to educate kids. Preschool, we have to make kindergarten in this state mandatory because it isn't now. We need to do all those preventive measures as well as have wiser interventions. We don't have judges in this county who like to lock children up. One of the problems is everybody has to be somewhere. It's part of the problem with the mentally ill in the jail because we've done away with mental hospitals. We have to reimagine and we have to spend some serious money if we're going to get anywhere positive.
Mr. Graham?
Do you mind repeating the question?
Sure, it's a little complicated. In 2014, statistics from the Michigan State Police files show that in that year, black youth in Washtenaw County were arrested at 5 times the rate of white youth and put into secure detention 2 times as often as white youth. What can prosecutors and the sheriff do to improve the equity in this situation?
Outside of one's office, place value on youth, place value on youth of color. To go outside of your office to engage with the youth, to get to know the educators in the community, those who support the youth, to champion what it is to be involved in one's community is a step one can take. And it shouldn't require a lot of money or a lot of time. In one's office, it means advocating for youth during the working hour and humbling people to understand that there is something called ageism, and oftentimes we allow isms to be very violent in our encounters. Youth have been criminalized as much as people of color in America's history, so we have to understand that youth have ideas, they have stories inside of them, and they also have an ability to contribute to society. Unless we reimagine how youth are in our community, we won't be able to place value on them. And I just want to end this by saying it's important for youth to be educated, to have transportation, to have love and care, and we can't do this unless we are willing to do so in our daily walk.
Next question, and this is for you, Mr. Graham, to start with. Why do you feel that you are the best qualified person for this position?
I don't have a law degree. I'm not limited to my past experience having an affinity for law. I am an educator. I understand that we are whole. We are individuals. We have blood coursing through our veins. We all share the same oxygen. It's not just important for me to advocate that people are engaged in the community for political purposes. I think social norms in our community are outdated, and in order for us to address the social inequities, we have to also address the political inequities that affect youth, people of color, women identified and women-bodied persons in our community. I may not be the best candidate. I am willing to contest our incumbent. I am willing to challenge anyone who during the primaries seemed to be running uncontested. It's important for us to be engaged, and I can't just tweet that. I can't just walk up to someone's door and knock on their door encouraging them to engage. I have to do it, and that's what I'm willing to do right now.
Mr. Mackey?
Well, the law degree is a start for why I am qualified, because that is a requirement of the job, but there's much more than that. I mentioned some of it in my opening statement. I'm a lifelong resident of Washtenaw County. I grew up in something that doesn't exist anymore called Willow Village, which was wartime housing that lasted long after the war. Unlike other people who could leave public housing because they, for whatever reason, had enough resources, they had the money to move out. My family had to move out of public housing because we couldn't afford it anymore. My mother had to move with my sisters and I into her mother's house. These plant some memories in you. Maybe I see too much of a class struggle all my life, but I care about that. It wasn't my first choice of a law school, but it ended up that was the one I could afford. I went to Wayne State. And after 1 year of school, you can practice law as a student. And I got into free legal aid, which was also at that time Model Cities Misdemeanor Clinic. So I got to represent a great many indigent people. That helped. My years as an assistant prosecutor, prosecuting every kind of crime, especially sexual assaults and also a lot of murders, made me have empathy for victims of crime who are devastated. We haven't talked much about victims, and I hope there'll be some questions about that, but thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. Washtenaw has diversionary justice programs for mental illness and drug dependency. Do we have others? If not, should we? Are the courts, do we have sufficient demand for their services? I'm sorry, that's the first question goes to you, Mr. Mackey.
Yes. Yes, we do have other programs. We have a lot of specialty courts, boutique courts sometimes, and they serve a real purpose. People don't understand them. I mean, you hear talk about drug court. What does drug court mean? It means you don't lock people up, you give them help instead. Well, it's not quite that simple. It's a very rigorous program. Our sobriety court in the 15th District Court, for instance, does great work with people, and it's really hard. Some people opt to go to jail rather than go through the program. But at the end of it, they're better people. People can recover. We see the same thing with Veterans Treatment Court. We also have a, so far I would say, very unsuccessful juvenile rape court. I don't think anybody hears about that. They don't crow about it. It's a diversion for people who have raped, and sometimes they rape again while they're in the court, and even in one instance a third time. But there's a place for that. We have lots of diversions that you don't even hear about. It's hard to get into the juvenile system. We have far fewer juvenile offenders now, partly because we have far fewer police officers than we did to handle the complaints.
I'm sorry to have you repeat the question again.
That's perfectly
it's late.
fine.
Yeah, I'm trying to stay on subject.
Yep. So Washtenaw has diversionary justice programs for mental illness and drug dependency. Do we have others? If not, should we? And are the courts we do have sufficient for the demand for their services?
Washtenaw County has the highest recidivism rate in the state of Michigan. There are 83 counties in the state of Michigan. Most of the people who enter the correctional facility here in Washtenaw County are from Ypsilanti proper and Ann Arbor proper, the two communities I mentioned before. Out of those 10 communities who have local police agencies, Ypsilanti has the highest return rate, the individuals who are entering the system and then they're coming back into their community and then they go back to jail, and that cycle happens like 3 or 4 times. Maybe we don't have enough in place. I don't know of any facility in the community that can house non-assaultive offenders. From what I understand in the community, 1 out of 5 individuals are non-assaultive, non-violent offenders, and they're housed with violent offenders. We are criminalizing the average person. 83% of the people in our county jail live in Washtenaw County. We need to understand that the numbers reflect the view of the public, and right now the public is the economic driver for our current correctional system. If we refuse to place value on each other and understand that we may have an opportunity to leverage existing resources to put alternative infrastructure in place and alternative systems in place, if we don't do that, we're going to continue to lose thousands of people, and they will not be able to live healthy lives.
Well, I think that's it for our questions. Now it's time for the closing in the order. It's Mr. Mackey going first.
Thank you. Thank you again for hosting. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I thank Mr. Graham for being here with me. I want to talk about something other than what I had planned. One of it is recidivism rate. That's a very complicated issue. It's complicated even in deciding what do the numbers mean. our rate has been traditionally very high. Part of the answer to that people forget is, and one of our best local defense attorneys said it real succinctly, we have lower sentences than other places. People don't recidivate when they're in. However, we need to have more people out. We need to increase rather than decrease the Michigan Prisoner Reentry Initiative, and we need what the sheriff has instituted, and that is an initiative with the jail in trying to avoid reentry into the system. But something we don't talk about in this county, we have plenty of people who care deeply about offenders, very few who seem to care much about victims. And victims are sentenced too. Many victims, ones I talk to, rape victims especially, families who've had a murder, they suffer for the rest of their lives. And I wish we could think a little more about them.
Mr. Graham.
It is important for us to evaluate the functionality of the county prosecutor's office, the role of the county prosecutor. If the people are viewing right now Google county prosecutor, they probably won't find a lot of information that describes the role because it varies. We have to understand the roles and the functions of elected officials in order to make informed decisions. And I agree with the incumbent, we need to advocate for the individuals who are abused by the system, not those just incarcerated. There are individuals who have lost a loved one to the corrections facility. There are individuals who have lost a loved one to police misconduct, and generally they don't receive the type of response that I think we all would appreciate. There are many individuals in our community that don't have headstones, and they have fell victim to misconduct from county government level, and that's another reason why I'm inspired to run, because I would like to secure justice for the individuals who are, again, abused by the system. Thank you again for hosting us tonight and allowing us to contest each other's ideas.
Thank you to the candidates for participating in tonight's forum and to CTN for making this program possible. These forums will be rebroadcast on Channel 19 several times before the election, and they're going to be available on demand online. If you go to our website, lwvanarbor.org, you can find a link to this forum and to all of the forums that the League of Women Voters is hosting this fall. In addition, the National League of Women Voters has launched a website called vote411.org. All you have to do is enter your address, and you can find information, nonpartisan information, on every candidate and every issue that's going to be on your ballot, from the most local races all the way up top. We encourage everyone to go and visit that website. Finally, and most importantly, please be sure to vote on Tuesday, November 8th. Good night.